Okay guys, so welcome to today's lunchtime lesson class. We're doing a pronunciation focus today, and we're doing something called heteronyms. I don't know if you've ever heard of the word heteronym. It's usually not heard about by students, but it is something that can cause a lot of confusion for students. So even though you don't know that that's the official name. So that's why we're going to have a look at that today. Yeah, we're going to be having a look at what they are. I'm going to give you some examples, and then we're also going to investigate some pronunciation patterns which are useful for you to apply to your speaking. Okay, so there's not really pronunciation rules in English like a lot of other languages, but when you start to look at certain words or certain spellings, certain sounds, you can begin to see these patterns, and they're really helpful if you can identify them. And quite often when you find the patterns, you can sometimes find parallels with pronunciation in your language of similar words. Okay, which probably won't be the case today, but you know, it's something that can be helpful to find. Have a look, guys. We did a previous lunchtime lesson that was looking at common pronunciation patterns. So if you want to have a look at that, you can revise some of the things we talked about. Okay, so let's start with heteronyms. So first of all, what is a heteronym, right? What are they? So heteronyms, these are words that have the identical same spelling, but the meaning is different, and also when you read them, when you say them out loud, the pronunciation is different too. And that's what can make them so tricky for people learning English. And we do have a lot of them in English, as I'm sure you're probably aware. So to give you, I'll give you an example in a second. Can anyone think of any examples of words which are written the same with different spelling? You can type it in the chat box for me. Oh, very good, Nacha. Yeah, desert and dessert. So let me just give you quite a basic example, quite a common example, and it's the verb read. Yeah, so read is a heteronym, although the meaning, the core meaning of the word doesn't actually change when we, you know, because it's the verb, it's in the present aspect or in the past aspect. But you know, the meaning does slightly change. You read now or you read yesterday. So, you know, here we have to read a book for school. But in the past, I would say last week I read a book. Yeah. So that's just a very common or obvious example that we can do with heteronyms. So with heteronyms, like with all language, yeah, the context is key. So please remember, that's my little mantra, yeah? Language without context isn't language, right? So we need to have a look at how we're using the word, and that will help you identify what kind of word it is, and that will then subsequently help you with how you're going to pronounce that word. So I'm going to put some examples up here. As I show you the example, think in your mind what how you would pronounce them, okay? Just as they come up, right? You can say it to yourself, okay? And then what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at how we would analyze these sentences, yeah? And then how we pronounce them, okay? So if I look at that first sentence here, I need to think about what function the word is giving in each sentence. So for example, in the first one here, can anyone tell me what function that word is? You can write it in the chat box. By that, I mean noun, verb, adjective, verb. Great. Okay. And what about in the second example here? What's that word doing? Noun. Great. Okay. So we can do the same over here. Now in this one, this is a bit trickier because actually if we look at the function, what's the function of the first one? And what's the function of the second one? Good. So the first one's a noun and the second one also a noun. Yeah. So we've got two nouns in these examples. Okay. So it's quite possible that a heteronym, they can have the same function but still have different meanings and different pronunciations. Right. What about these ones here? What's the function of this first word? Is that a verb? Adjective. Good. And what's the function of this one here? It's a verb. Great. And then the last one, right? When people blah, blah, blah. They often, blah, blah, blah. Right, so what are the functions of these ones? Good. So this one is a verb, and this one is also a verb. Yeah, okay. So again, it's the same example as we saw in the second one. Right, now I need to look at the context of that sentence to help me think about what they mean. So we need to think about words that are going to help us. For example, bandage in that first sentence, a really useful word for us. And then after that, we need to think about the pronunciation. And I'm going to show you a great way that you can check pronunciation, because the amazing thing about learning English now is that you have all of these brilliant resources at your fingertips for free. If we look at that first sentence of the words here, yeah, and I'm not sure how to pronounce that word, I'm going to go to the Longman Dictionary. Right now, I don't know if you guys are familiar with this dictionary, but it's a really brilliant online dictionary. It's my favorite, along with the Cambridge Online, which is also really useful, but Longman has much better resources, I think. So Longman is the best place to go for your initial words if you're not sure. So let's have a look at this word that we typed in. And remember before that we did our analysis, yeah? So we said that in this example here, in the first one, we had a verb, and in the second one, we had a noun. So when I'm looking at my words, I'm going to consider that when I choose my answer. So the first one here says it's a noun, right? An injury to your body. And then I can listen to the pronunciation here. Yeah?
Wound.
Yes, you heard that? Great. You can also listen to the American English pronunciation.
Wound.
If you want to. Okay. So now I know how to pronounce the noun, right? So let's try it again. You can repeat it at home, guys.
Wound.
Okay. Wound. It's a long vowel sound. Wound. Right? And now I need to find the verb. Okay, so remember we looked at the noun, now I need to find the verb. So I'm going to go down, down, down. Okay, this is examples from the corpus. Okay, this is a verb. But if we look at our example here, it says the bandage. Okay, so if I look at that example that I saw here of the verb again, that says to injure someone with a knife, right? So that's not the verb that I want because it doesn't make sense for my context. So I'm going to keep going down, going down, going down. Oh, and then I find this. And that tells me that this word is the past tense of the word wind. And that makes sense for my context, right? So then I'm going to listen to my pronunciation.
Wound.
Okay, yeah, wound. So remember how we pronounced the first one? Yeah, we had?
Wound.
Yeah, and then our other one here is
Wound.
okay. So if I come back to my example sentences, now I know how to pronounce them correctly. We wound the bandage around the wound. I'm not going to do this with every example, but I am going to read the examples to you. Yeah. And you think about how you would pronounce them, and then I'm going to say them. Okay. So let's look at the second sentence. Say it to yourself. Take a second, right? Say it out loud. When you do pronunciation, guys, always say it out loud because sounds can be different inside your head, right? Okay. So this is what it should be. He shed a tear after he saw the tear in the painting. Okay. Now read the third sentence to yourself. Say it out loud. Don't say it in your head. When the fire was close, the authorities had to close the road. Okay, so we have a s in the first one and a z in the second one. Yeah. When the fire was close, the authorities had to close the road. And then our last sentence, say that to yourself. When people row boats, they often row with their partner. When people row boats, they often row with their partner. So you row like this with a boat. Row is when you have an argument with someone. With some heteronyms, there is actually quite a useful pronunciation pattern which you can apply. So let's have a look at these examples, which I'm going to show you. And we're going to do the same. I want you to think about what function they have in the sentence and how you pronounce them. Okay? So read through these examples, just take a minute. Yeah. Think about what the function is for each one and think about how you would pronounce them. Now, so if we look at these examples, we've got either verbs or nouns, right? So the first one we have a verb, the second one we have the noun. Verb, noun, verb, noun. Now, we need to think about whether in our pronunciation there's a pattern to these. Yep. Did anyone pick up on a pattern? Or do you think you've noticed a pattern? Right, so let me show you some examples, guys. It's all related to stress, okay, to word stress. So if we have our first sentence there, the farmer has to produce the produce. We've got our stress on the verb like this, produce, and the noun like this, produce. You record a record in a studio. It's dangerous to desert the army in the desert. You will have to project your voice when you explain the project. John will present the present to Sarah. I subject my friends to pain when I discuss the subject of my operation. I object to the object being included as evidence. And finally, they refuse to move the refuse. So what do we notice, guys? What's the rule? Look at that pattern. If we have a two-syllable heteronym, right, like these examples that we've seen here, if it's the verb, the stress is on the second syllable. But if it's a noun, the stress is on the first syllable. What's important though, guys, is that we need to remember that on that unstressed syllable, we're pretty much always using the schwa. So for people who don't know what the schwa is, it's this symbol here, and this is what the most common vowel sound in the English language, okay? It's a neutral vowel sound. So you're pronouncing it like this. Your tongue isn't doing anything, your lips aren't doing anything, your jaw isn't doing anything, right? I quite often describe it like if you've got something that smells really bad and you imagine you smell it and you go, okay? That's the sound that we're aiming for. So if we go back to just have a quick look at those examples, it's not produce, it's produce. And it's not record, it's record. And this is important because if you don't use the schwa, what happens is that you actually use the incorrect stress. So if I use a strong vowel sound here, if I say re instead of r, listen to how I pronounce it. Record. If I don't use the schwa, it sounds like the noun, okay? Record, record, right? And this is why using schwas is so important. I'm sure you've probably all had the experience when you're speaking in English and you know you are using the correct word, but people do not understand you. And most of the time that happens, it's because you are not using a schwa. You're using what we call a strong vowel sound, like an a, e, I, o, u. If you do that, it doesn't really matter how many times you say a word, people won't understand you because word stress is so important to the pronunciation of the English language. So the example I usually give is the word carrot. Okay, if you say carrot instead of carrot, it doesn't matter how many times you say the word carrot, people won't get it. So it's really important that we work with that schwa. And here's a great example of why that's so important.